My topic is human ecology, food security, and disaster preparedness. I'm not an expert on disasters, but I'm going to focus on that topic today because it's so important to get on the table. My field actually is human ecology, which is about human-environment interaction and what makes that interaction sustainable or not sustainable. Some basic principles of sustainability which apply to climate change and much more are in this book titled Human Ecology. The entire book is free online, and I recommend it for a more basic understanding of what's going on with people and the environment in today's world. My main work these days is the Eco-Tipping Points Project, whose website, ecotippingpoints.org, that's easy to remember, ecotippingpoints.org. The website features more than 100 environmental success stories from around the world, including Hawaii, and lessons from the stories about what it takes to turn human-environment interaction around from decline to being sustainable. It's about levers, doable actions with far-reaching effects that are strong enough to leverage a positive turnabout. And for example, we heard earlier about the importance of reversing deforestation to get carbon back onto the landscape, out of the atmosphere. And the website has a number of short videos, like 10-15 minutes, and one of them is about reversing tropical deforestation in Thailand. And it's not about, it would really be great to do that, but it's a success story where in a large area they actually did it and brought the carbon dioxide back into their landscape, and how they did it with applications all over the world, including here. Finally, for context, I want to mention a project that I'm doing with other environmental scientists about American food security. And there's a whole pile of articles about food security in North America at the Eco-Tipping Points website. What would happen if a flu epidemic shut down the boats bringing food to Hawaii? I mean, we all ponder this once in a while. In fact, every American city is an island, completely dependent on nonstop infusion of food, and a pandemic isn't the only way things could go wrong. Climate change is now causing extreme weather to be more frequent, like droughts and storms. We had wake-up calls from the Midwest drought in 2012 and the shutdown of irrigation this year in California's Central Valley, which has been responsible for 1/3 of the nation's fruit and vegetable production. Here in Hawaii, there have been wake-up calls from the near misses during the hurricane season this year. We'll have hurricanes without climate change, but with climate change, we can expect a direct hit by a severe hurricane to be sooner. I think hurricane preparedness is a major way that we can help to deal with a consequence of climate change that's facing us here and now. Last year, some of my colleagues and I looked into what's happening with regard to government preparedness for maintaining food supply after a disaster. We weren't able to learn much about what's happening with the federal government. Agencies like FEMA and Homeland Security seem to keep their cards pretty close to their chest. Besides that, Homeland Security is concerned mostly with terrorism, like putting something bad in the food or water supply. FEMA is more central for disaster response, and on the mainland has arrangements with large retailers like Walmart and so on to get food from their warehouses to truck into disaster areas. And the Department of Agriculture works with state governments on projects that are relevant to food security. But we saw what happened with New Orleans and Katrina, and that was a much easier situation than remote islands in Hawaii. In my survey of what's happening, I got the best information from the people in state civil defense. They were refreshingly candid and helpful. I think the main thing I can contribute today is to fill you in on what I learned from them, while keeping in mind that what I'm about to say is in no way intended to represent civil defense. I could be mistaken about some of the details, but the overall picture seems pretty clear. Imagine the devastation on this island after a direct hit from a Category 4 hurricane. 1 million people, pretty helpless, in need of food and water for weeks or more. What food do we have for that? Well, FEMA has 30,000 MREs, meals ready to eat, in a warehouse here. That's enough for 3% of us to have one meal. How about the military? It has stored food, but I was told it's not for civilians. The military would bring in food and water by boat and airplane once the harbor and airports are up and running again, but that could take as much as 2 weeks to get off the ground. And enough food for 1 million people? I don't think so. Incidentally, safe drinking water could be even more serious than food. We die in 3 to 5 days without water. Where is drinking water for 1 million people if it's not coming out of the faucet? I was told that after a disaster, it could take months for electricity to be up and running again, and the Board of Water Supply does not have backup generators to pump water. Where will food come from? Civil Defense told me that after disaster, the food is expected to come primarily from normal commercial operations. There's a problem here. Throughout the history of civilization, food storage has been the cornerstone of security. But it's no longer that way in today's hyper-efficient, just-in-time delivery world. Civil Defense told me that supermarkets and their warehouses on Oahu have about a 5-day food supply, though we might not be able to count on the warehouses because most are near the harbor where they can be taken out by storm surge. The harbor may be up and running within a week or two for boats to bring in food, boats coming from the West Coast, but maybe not. County government will be responsible for helping to distribute food around the island, and I'm sure we can also expect good things from the National Guard in many ways. When I asked about county emergency plans, I was able to read some plans that already existed and hear about plans in preparation. They dealt mainly with the responsibilities of different county agencies without spelling out details. And I got the impression that concrete preparation may not already be in place in many instances. When I asked Civil Defense, what can environmental professionals like me do to help? And I think the same question would really apply. What can any concerned citizens do to help? The reply was, find a way to convince people to store more food and water. Civil Defense policy is to urge people to store 7 days supply of food and water. While we don't seem to be even close to 7 days storage, it seems to me that at least 3 weeks of food and water is more what we need. And it won't work unless most of us do it. When I was surveying some of this on the internet, I was looking at commercial avenues for stored food, freeze-dried food, and they can last 25 years and so on and so on. And some of the advertising pictures had a stack of boxes there with a guy and a high-powered rifle across his arms, which I think kind of sums up what it can come to if most of us don't do it. Several years ago, I took a disaster preparedness course offered by the state. The idea was to train people to organize their neighborhoods. It was a pretty good course, and I asked at the end of the course how many people they were training. The answer was about 150 each year. Not quite the scale we need. So, what does everything that I've described mean for us? I'd say it means there's plenty of room for improvement and plenty of opportunity for concerned citizens to make it better. Many of the shortfalls are a direct consequence of the massive scale of providing for 1 million people. We're stuck with that, and it won't help us to ignore it. So what can we do? Well, we can start by talking with government officials to take stock of the problem and what's already being done, fleshing out a shared picture among us, which is more thorough than what I've done so far, Then we can think about what we can do in collaboration with government, civil society, or private sector to jumpstart improvement of the most important needs. Coordination with state civil defense will be essential, and I can provide contact information for the hurricane manager at Civil Defense to anyone who wants it. And I should mention that my experience with environmental scientists doing things not only with civil society and government, but also the private sector, is on issues of food security, is that even the very large companies in the private sector are deeply concerned about functioning in the future, given the challenges that exist. And that they're very, very open. There's a lot of common ground between this kind of concern, and they're very open to people who want to work with them, and often others working with them can help them in a way that they can't do by themselves. We have a series of articles coming out on that, and what has happened where the large food corporations have not been able to do things by themselves, but collaboration with others has made the difference. I want to close by mentioning an impressive example that I saw of what concerned citizens can do. It was at a disaster preparedness fair at a shopping mall last year. CB radio hobbyists had a booth there, explaining how they'll step in to fill the communications gap after a disaster. I was impressed. These guys are really ready to go. I'm sure that there are numerous ways that the rest of us can get it together like those guys, helping to fill some of the gaps and make the whole thing work better. And I'll stop there.